Hi, this is Don VanZant with the Guardian Project. And this is our podcast that basically deals with stories, telling stories of how people deal with a lot of things or what they've gone through or are going through. And we're coming to the realization that not everyone's journey is the same. You know, even though they may have some similarities or some commonalities, things that tie them together, there are so many differences from person to person to person. And today, we're privileged to be with Jill King. I've known Jill, Trinket and I have known Jill for a lot of years, and I've known Jill even longer than that. And we're very privileged to be here with Jill today. Jill, this year marks the 27th year or the 27th anniversary of your marriage to Eric.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the last 6.5 have been without Eric.
Yeah.
Take us back, however you want. Take us back to that time, and it doesn't have to be that particular day yet. You can lead up to it. However you want to approach that day that completely changed your life, the life of your all's daughters, and the whole family. Take us back to that time and how it all came about, what happened, and however you want to address that.
Well, in 2018, Eric and I were residing here in Oklahoma City. We have 3 daughters. At the time, they were 11 and 15 and 17. And Eric was traveling for work. He was in management for a tissue regenerist corporation. They sold tissue, living tissue. And he had been out of town. He had just gotten back in town on a Thursday. And it was a Saturday morning. We got up and he said, "You want to go for a run?" And
Which you guys
which we did.
have always been
all the time.
For a long time, we're runners.
Yeah. So I said, sure. So he said, well, let's run around Lake Overholser, which we had done before. And so got up, got ready. We went down and we started running. We had run about 4 miles, and it was just he and I. We stopped to walk just a little bit, and I had some Gatorade in a bottle, and we were sharing, and we walked for about a minute, and he had said, "Was that last mile hard for you?" And I said, "Well, no." It just kind of feeling like he was saying that I had run slow because, sometimes he was 6'3", I was 5'8". His stride was a little, longer than mine. He could run a little faster than I could. And I said, well, no, it wasn't. And that's all he said. He didn't go into further if he felt bad or anything. And he just said, okay. And I had been, enough walking. And I said, well, are you ready to go? And he said, no. He said, you just go on. And I just took off.
Was that different? Was that unusual?
That's normal. He a lot of times would want me to go ahead of him so that he could stride out a little bit and catch up with me and just feel a little more comfortable, running at a pace he liked. And so I didn't think anything of it. It wasn't weird. I just said, okay, and I went off. And I hit the next mile marker for us, and I turned around because he hadn't caught up with me, and he was still there walking. He was quite a bit behind me,
Could you still see him at that point?
I could still see him.
Okay.
Yeah. And I thought, well, okay. I knew we had a water bottle just down the road a little bit around a bend. And I thought, I'm just going to run to that. It was maybe a quarter of a mile. I thought, I'm just going to run to that water bottle and wait for him there. And so I ran ahead, got to the water bottle, waited. Not really exactly sure how long I waited, but it felt like too long. Maybe 10 minutes. I'm not exactly sure how long it was.
Did y'all have cell phones with you at that
Yes. And so I didn't call him. I just walked back down the street, back where I came from, and looked around the corner to look down the street, and I didn't see him. And I thought, well, that's strange. Why don't I see him? That's when I pulled my phone out and I looked at his location, and it told me that he had gone backwards, back the way we had come from, which I thought was strange. But I thought, well, I don't know why. Maybe he needed to go back the other direction. So I just continued going. I knew that I had a shorter distance where I was from to get back to the car. So I just kept going the direction I had been headed. And once I got close to where the car was, for whatever reason, I thought I couldn't see it. Now, it really was there, but I didn't think it was there. So I immediately pulled my phone out and looked for Eric. And I saw that his location had him on Hefner Parkway. And so I just started calling his phone, and no answer. And I looked again at his location, and he was at Baptist Hospital. So I knew.
So about how much time has elapsed?
Gosh, when I started running again, I had about 3 more miles to run. So maybe 30 minutes.
Wow.
Maybe 30 minutes from when I had started running again. So I left him a message and said, I don't know what's going on, but I see where you are. I'm going to get Peyton. We will be there, or I'm going to call Peyton. I'm coming. And so I called my oldest daughter, Peyton, and she came and picked me up at the lake. And we just started heading to Baptist Hospital. My other 2 daughters were at home. I had one home with a friend who had spent the night, my youngest, and then my 15-year-old, I think, still asleep. I mean, this was maybe 9 or 10 in the morning. Mm-hmm. So my oldest and I walk in the hospital. Well, I need to backtrack a little bit. On the way to the hospital, my cell phone rings, and it's Eric's phone. And so I answer it thinking it's Eric, but it's a man that I don't know.
That's not good.
And I said, he said, we have, or I think what I didn't even let him talk. I think I just picked up the phone and said, hey, we're coming. Like, we're coming to the hospital now. And the man on the other end of the phone said, okay, we have your husband. There will be someone to meet you at the desk when you get here. Come to the emergency room. And so we get to the hospital. We walk in. There's a chaplain standing at the desk. I don't know that I knew it was a chaplain at first, but that's who it was. And he immediately just starts walking us back into the ER.
Did he tell you who he was?
I think he probably did.
You think he told you he was a chaplain?
I think he probably did. But I honestly, in my mind, was just like, what's happened?
Yeah.
What do we need? Something happened to him while he's running, but he got himself here. That's what I thought.
Yeah, right.
He got himself to the hospital. I don't know what's going on. So we start walking back, the 3 of us. And when we get about halfway back, I see panicked faces on nurses that are sitting at their, stations in the middle of the room.
Because they know
what I don't know.
The queen has arrived.
Yes.
Wow.
And I see a male nurse, probably the guy that called me, run toward the chaplain and calling him over. And I hear him say, "You cannot bring them back here." And so very quickly, he turns us around.
So when you heard that, and I don't want you to stop the story, but when you heard that, any thoughts yet? Or are you
I have no idea.
Trying to process everything?
Yeah. I mean, he's had a heart attack. He got hit by a car. What happened?
Yeah.
I still don't.
But the fact that
really,
you thought the car wasn't there and he had taken himself
there.
I
thought he had taken himself.
Yeah.
Still. And so they turn us around. They take Peyton and I into a room and shut the door. And we're sitting there just thinking what is going on. Very nervous. I mean, very nervous. Obviously, it's not good. And within a minute, I mean, it wasn't long at all, a doctor comes in and sits down, and he just says, "I am sorry to tell you that your husband is not alive." I may not be saying the words correctly, but he said, "Your husband is no longer living."
My
oh my word!
The ambulance brought him in, and we did everything we could. We could not revive him, and then it was just, shock and my daughter was crying and I mean, I think I definitely cried, but it was more like
the shock.
How can he not be alive? How could you not save him?
Yeah.
That's
not something you wake up
right.
mapping out your day. Okay, here's where I'm going to fall. I'm going to crash right here. I'm going to have my heart attack here. This is when I'm bad. You just don't do that.
Well, and just hospitals save people. Like, I mean, if something happened to him on the run, then the ambulance can save him, right? Like
you would certainly think, that's our mindset anyway.
And so just asking, I do remember asking questions, at least like, well, what happened? And it was a lot of, well, we don't exactly know. It won't. You really won't have answers until if you choose to have an autopsy. We suspect he had a heart attack, but the ambulance could never revive him.
So basically, he was pretty much dead on the ground.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
So found out what had happened was when the first time I looked at his location, it was giving me an old location. The first time when I first looked and I thought he had gone back the other way running, that was it just hadn't updated. It was an old location. So, and then what happened in the meantime while I was standing there waiting at that water bottle, there was a truck driving on that lake road, and there was a man who was fishing not very far away. And two different people at the same time, they saw Eric fall to the ground. The people in the truck called 911 immediately. A police officer that is there for lake duty was there within a minute and began CPR on Eric. Did not revive him. And the ambulance was there within 5 minutes.
Wow, that's amazing.
And they worked on him all the way from the lake to the hospital. And then, of course, they continued trying to revive him in the hospital. I don't know how long they tried, but it had been, I'm sure by the time I got there, it had probably been at least an hour. The timeline is iffy to me past that point. It's just events that happened. So that was the moment that we found out, and it was my oldest daughter and I that were together.
So you hear it, you're in shock, which is very understandable. Your oldest daughter is there with you. And her response is, I think, the way any daughter's is going to be.
Yes.
Your other 2 daughters aren't there. How did they find out?
So, an accidental call I had made to my dad on the way to the hospital let him know we were going. So he was already on his way to the hospital before I knew anything. Once I found out that Eric was gone, I think my dad was my first call. And I called my dad and said, he's gone.
Mm.
And
It's crazy because I don't know. There's something about if there's a good relationship, there's something about Dad that just makes everything okay.
yeah,
And so it's understandable that that's your first call. And yet in this case, Dad can't make everything okay.
no, and I mean he was my first call because I knew he was coming.
Yeah.
When I accidentally called him on the way to the hospital, he said, I'm coming. He was actually on his way to work. He was working that Saturday morning. And so I called him. Somehow we ended up talking about my mom going to get my other 2 daughters who were at home and bringing them to the hospital.
So at this point, you've not called them to let them know
No.
something's up.
They knew. They knew something had happened to Dad.
Okay.
Yes, my oldest daughter or my middle daughter, I can't remember if I talked to her or if it was my Peyton that told Kaylin that something had happened to Dad and that we were on the way to the hospital because Peyton left the house to come and get me at the lake.
Gotcha.
So they did know something was going on, but I mean, we didn't know until we got there. So last we had talked to them, it was just something's up. We're going to figure it out. We'll just be in touch. So my mom went and picked them up, understanding that I wanted to be the one to tell them. And so that was a really scary car ride for
Your
my
mom
and my kids.
and the daughters.
Just not understanding why isn't she telling us what's going on? What's going on? And so they brought them into the room where Peyton was with me. And we had some other family who had made it by then. I think my brother-in-law was there maybe, and my nephew. I mean, my memory's a little foggy, but it was amazing how quickly people got there. So they brought them in and they left me in there with them by myself because that's the way I wanted it, just to be the 4 of us. And I had to tell them, I just said, something's happened to your dad and he didn't make it. And
oh my goodness,
it was the worst, really the worst moment of my life. The crying and the screaming, and it just felt like it didn't end. And in that moment, after I said that, just for quite a while, all I could say was, Jesus. I just was praying his name just over them. I was holding them as they were screaming and crying and just saying his name because it's just all I could say. And my family came back in very quickly when they heard, because they just wanted to help and wanted to be there. And it was just lots of just hugging and crying. And but I'd say in that moment, I never in my life have I thought how powerful the name of Jesus is until that day when literally I just had nothing. I had nothing I could say, nothing I could do, no comfort that I could give, really. And just
That's such a helpless feeling for a parent.
Yeah. Just calling on the only person I knew who could save me
Yep.
and save them. And when I could talk again, I do remember saying to them before we left, "We will live.
Mm.
Your dad isn't with us, but we are going to keep going. We are going to live life. That is what he would want. That's what I want. You guys have a lot of life to live. We are going to live."
Mm.
And yeah, it was, I mean, that room, I don't ever want to go back there for any reason. Yeah, definitely. We have, Overholser had some feelings for quite a while, Lake Overholser, and then Baptist Hospital is another, just like not really one of my favorite places.
I
But
can understand that.
but I've been back. I mean, not to that room, but
Yeah.
yeah, places kind of adopt our feelings.
So true.
Yeah.
So your family is embracing you, obviously. Tell me about friends, extended family, their response. I mean, obviously, the world we live in is so different than when I was a kid, in that word gets out in real time.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of response was there from your close circle of friends, extended family? How long did it take for the word to get to them, and what did you experience from that standpoint?
Well, that was a pretty, I honestly, I don't even know. I don't know how it got out. I didn't even call my own sisters. I think my parents did that. I remember calling, I had to call Eric's folks and tell them. I called a friend, some good friends of ours. We had a couple friend, Drew and Nadia were our best friends. We did stuff with them almost every weekend. And I called them, but everybody else there were people just showing up. So they did let me go see Eric before my other two daughters came to the hospital, in that middle time between Peyton and I finding out and my other two coming. They let me go back to see him. And they offered it to Peyton. At first, she wasn't sure that she wanted to, so she stayed in the room with my brother-in-law, I believe, and my nephew. But my dad took me back. And as we got closer to the room, I remember getting a first glimpse of him laying on that table, and I just collapsed to the ground. And I just couldn't stand. And my dad caught me, and they put me in a wheelchair real fast and took me in there, and I was able to see him and try to really realize that he wasn't coming back. I mean, because up until that point, even in the room after the doctor told me he was gone, I was praying, God, you can do anything.
Yeah.
Bring him back.
Yeah.
Like, you can do anything. I believe you can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I saw him, I was like, oh, he is not coming back. And in that room, while I was in there, my dad was in there with me. I had, eventually Peyton came down with my brother-in-law and my nephew both. And then people just started coming in. My sister, my friends that I had called, his folks. And I remember when I walked back to the room that we came from to talk with, I think, my daughters at that point, although I might have already talked to him at then. I'm getting a little confused on orders of things. But when I walked back to the front, I mean, I had so many friends were there. So many of our friends and pastors were there. And by the time we left the hospital, there were even teachers. Some of my daughter's teachers, 2 of them, Lisa
Really?
Tackett
Yeah.
and their cross-country coach, Teresa Johnston, were coming in. I couldn't believe it. And their friends from cross-country, like, it was amazing. The people that just wanted to be there.
Yeah.
They couldn't even do anything. They're just standing there, but just like that, the support started immediately. And I don't know how everybody
That's
found
crazy.
out, but
Wings
they
holding
did.
you up, you know.
Yeah, but it was immediate.
So you're obviously feeling all the stuff that's going on up here in your mind and in your heart, that immediate time. Over the next few days, you're planning a funeral that wasn't supposed to happen for another 40 years at least. And what's your mindset? I mean, there's probably still some shock maybe, or...
I think the early days, I don't remember very much. There are people that say that is protection.
Yeah.
What I remember doing is going to bed. I was able to sleep, and that might be the prayers of everybody. I don't know. I really, the first night or 2, I definitely went to bed thinking about it, but I was able to sleep. But waking up, trying to brush my hair, brush my teeth, put on clothes, and just go sit on my couch all day. And I would have 1 or 2 of my kids on either side of me, and then usually a friend or one of my sisters, and just sitting and just crying. I mean, that was basically the first week. We put the funeral off for about a week because it was just such a shock.
Yeah, absolutely.
And trying to wrap our mind around all of that. And Monday after he passed on a Saturday morning, the Monday after was Memorial Day. So we started, trying to do the planning and stuff on Tuesday, and then his funeral was Friday. But those first few days and weeks, first couple of weeks in particular, I feel like it was just a lot of everybody coming over. We just had people at the house all of the time. My sisters were there from the moment I woke up. They would be there, and somebody would be there all day. I mean, they were worried about me, although I never felt hopeless. Maybe one moment, I remember calling my sister and saying, "What's the point?"
Oh.
I didn't really mean it. I knew my kids were always a point.
No, I think, yeah, you knew that, but whether it's one time or 101 times, I think it's maybe even the right thing to ask.
Yeah.
What's the point? Why?
Yeah. I do remember saying that to her once. I'm not sure I said it to anybody else, but I did say it to Jana that I felt that way. But I just think they wanted to make sure we were not alone. Mm-hmm. We very much wanted to be at home. That first night, we went straight from the hospital to my folks' house, who don't live that far from me. And somebody brought food, and we were all just sitting there in shock with my whole family there. My friends, Drew and Nadia were also behind the scenes. They had gone to get Eric's Jeep at the lake. They had gone to the house and tried to pick some things up. And so just people all around us. But that first night, thinking at some point somebody asked, what do you want to do? Do you want to stay here? What do you guys want to do? And I mean, I looked at my kids and I said, what do you guys think? And I knew what I wanted. Yeah. And they said, we want to go home. Wow. And I said, yeah, I want to go home too. So we went home, and it was weird and it was hard. And we have 2 dogs and a cat, and we walked in and the dogs knew very much something was not okay.
Isn't that crazy how they can sense that?
Yeah, they were very... I had 2 labs at the time, so they have a lot of energy normally, but they were very cautious with us and just sticking close to us. And that first night, we all slept in the living room together because we just didn't want to be alone. Mm-hmm. And then after that night, we moved to where we all slept in my bedroom. And that lasted for a couple of weeks with all of us sleeping in my bedroom. And then my oldest went to her room. And then by the end of the summer, my middle daughter went back to her room. And then Emerson, my youngest, stayed with me for a year. I mean, she was 11 when he passed. She turned 12 a couple of months later. But it just, the togetherness, I think, is the main thing in the first days and weeks and months is what got us through. And I don't know, if I didn't have them, maybe my story would just be way different. But my hope in Jesus carried me and for them. Like that, I knew that is what I had to do. I had to have my own hope to hold on to so that I could offer them hope.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. So
amazing story.
Did you ever, you said the one time you asked Jana, or you just commented to Jana, what's the point or why? What's the purpose? Did you ever ask God that? I mean, like, God, we promised you we're doing this thing right. We're committing to you while we're committing to each other. Till death do us part doesn't mean in our 40s. Did you ever question God and say, why? What's up?
The only real questioning I remember having of him is, why wasn't I there? And that was just in the first day, really just within the first few hours of feeling like I should have been there. And why wasn't I there? And that was just another time in my life where he doesn't speak audibly, but I have a handful of times where it might as well be out loud because I just hear specifically words from him. Yeah. And he said, I didn't want you there. And that was protection for me. One thing I'm just going to go into how I didn't have to question because I knew provision. I could see provision from God. That was one thing. That he knew that if I was there was nothing I could have done. Because like we established earlier, when Eric fell, he was gone. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In my mind, in my understanding, Eric took a step and left the earth and went straight to heaven. There was never a moment where he was in limbo. And if I would have been there, I just truly think there was absolutely nothing I could have done. And maybe I would have just been bearing the weight of thinking I didn't do something right.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was provision. I didn't have to question him. And then he just steadily in those first few days was showing me how God went before me. He was good to show me that. So the night before, as I had said, he had been out of town that week. He got back on Thursday. Friday night, he wanted to go out to dinner with friends. He wanted it to be a fun Friday night. He'd been out of town. He called, a couple different friends of ours, and nobody could get together. And my daughter had her friend over, and I said, we kind of need to be home because this friend is here, and she can't be here without us here.
Yeah.
And so it ended up just being the two of us at home with Emerson and her friend. My other daughters were out that night just for the evening. And he and I got pizza and sat on the back porch and watched an NBA Finals game. Or I don't know if it was the finals. It was probably just in the tournament. I have to be specific about that. But we were watching an NBA game. And we just had time, just the two of us. And, he had been out of town. And we were sitting there watching the game. And Eric loved to ask questions and, see what you think about things. And he said to me Friday night, the 25th, what are you going to miss the most about me when I'm gone?
Oh, my goodness.
And I laughed because that's very Eric. And I told him, I said, well, the thing I think I'll miss the most is the way you make me laugh. And that's true. I do miss very much the way he makes me laugh. But there's a whole lot more that I miss than that. But, he asked me that question the night before he died. The morning that he passed away, he woke up before I did. He went outside on the back porch and had his quiet time. I think, if I remember correctly, he had even left the devotional book and his coffee mug were still on the back porch whenever my friends went to the house to kind of take the Jeep back and take care of things. But that morning, he had sat on the porch, and I saw on his phone later, that morning he had recorded a video of the sunrise.
Oh my.
And I'm not sure what brought it to mind for him, but when I got up, he said, I've got a song for you to start your day today. And I said, okay, what? And he pulls out his phone and he starts playing The Majesty and the Glory of Your Name, which is a song that we sang in choir at Bethany First Church for, a lot of years. And that song is based on Psalm 8. And I wrote down verse 3 and 4, which is how the song starts. It says, when I look at the night sky and see the works of your fingers, the moon and the stars you set in place, what are mere mortals that you should think about them, human beings that you should care for them? And I feel like Eric had a special moment with God that morning before I was even awake. I had somebody ask me, you think he knew? And I said, I don't. Yeah. I don't think he knew, but I think that God is gracious and prepares whether we know what's going to happen or not.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So we had that morning. The week before, I go to Life Church Northwest Campus in Oklahoma City, and the week before, Pastor Craig Rochelle was doing a sermon called When Pigs Fly. And we still had sermon notes, like physical notes then. Now, I don't feel like they do that anymore. It's all just online. Yep. But I got in his car a few days after he passed away, and there in the car were his sermon notes from that Sunday before he passed away the next Saturday. And in his handwriting, he had copied down the note, long before you face a problem, God has a plan. And
That's amazing.
I just, God just kept showing me these things over and over again. Like, I will say, I don't think God took Eric. People have asked me that. Why do you think he had to take him? Or that's not the way I look at it. I look at it that God knows. He knows what's going to happen. And I feel like as best as he could, he tried to make it good for us. Mm-hmm. He tried to prepare us as best he can. He tried to prepare Eric. There are things in his personal life that I saw, reconciliations, things that were different, even in how he was a parent, some softening in him, even just 6 months before he passed away. He was always a great dad. He always said everything that needed to be said. He didn't leave things left unsaid. There was no question when he died that he loved all of us, that he had put as much energy and time and love and effort into those kids as he could. So I just have never had to question and blame God because he just provided. He was in town when it happened. He wasn't out of town.
Kidding.
Oh, wow.
It didn't happen at home. So many people lose loved ones at home. I didn't lose them at home. So home was still a safe place of comfort for us. Yeah. It happened on the first official day of summer for my daughters, which is
so they didn't have to.
They didn't have to go right back into school.
Wow.
Some time to heal.
Even a silly thing. He had a company car, but we also have a Jeep, and that was Eric's car. The car I'm left with is the Jeep. If anyone drives a Jeep, they know Jeep has community. Jeep, when you're driving down the road, you give each other a little wave. I've got people waving at me every day just driving down the road. I was left with community. Eric didn't travel until 18 months before he passed away. He had always worked from living at home. He might be driving places, but he didn't really spend the night overnight. Yeah. The last 18 months of his career, he switched into management, and he was traveling during the week. It was really hard for him. He didn't want to be away from his kids. He didn't want to miss stuff. He didn't like that. Yeah. But I see that now as God doing a little preparation for us to be ready, that we were going to have to be used to him not being around. Yeah. One thing he said about me from the get-go when we started dating years ago was that he loved that I didn't need him. That was the way he said it.
Really?
That Jill, I love that she didn't need me. And I think God made me the way I am, even from childhood.
Independent.
To be able to tackle some things maybe that I didn't even think that I could. That leads me to I can do all things. Philippians 4:13. I love the Amplified Version. It says, I can do all things which he has called me to do through him who strengthens and empowers me to fulfill his purpose. I am self-sufficient in Christ's sufficiency. I'm ready for anything and equal to anything through him who infuses me with inner strength and confident peace. So, God made me the way that I am so that I could handle maybe some things that were coming that I didn't know. And more than just losing Eric, there have been other things in my life. We lost a dog. That sounds so silly, but in 2007, we lost a dog suddenly and tragically. He was only 2 years old. Wow. He had a heat stroke on a run, and it was really shocking and difficult. But just a teeny tiny sliver of what it compares to losing a father and a husband. But we had at least experienced sudden loss. 11 years before. And then I cleaned houses for a time. while my kids were young, even up until Eric passed, I was cleaning houses. And toward the end, I was really getting sick of it. Like, why am I doing this? I don't really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I remember the Lord telling me at that time, you're doing it for Carolyn. And I had a house that I cleaned for a beautiful widow
named Carolyn.
Carolyn Barlow. And I cleaned for her for several years. And she lost her husband to a heart attack. She was a little older than I was, but probably, I think she was in her 50s, maybe close to 60 when he passed. And he told me then, you're cleaning for Carolyn. And I thought, okay, if it's just to be a companion to Carolyn every 2 weeks, I'm fine with that. But little did I know, a few years later, I was going to lose my husband. And I needed to see the beautiful life that Carolyn has lived and the way she loved her children.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. So I can't be mad at God,
Yeah.
Don, because he's done so much to pave the way for me.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's easy.
Yeah.
But I don't have to do it by myself. And so that's why I can't. If I've ever had bitterness or being upset at him, it fades very quickly. It's not
That is
something
so
I hold on
cool.
to.
That's not everybody's journey. That is so cool.
Yeah.
So tell us about how, you just told us how your response has been to God. You lost your life partner 21 years into a rest of your life deal. And a rest of your life deal is supposed to be, 60 whatever years. And you got 21 of them. So did you ever feel shortchanged by him? By Eric?
I have, if there's been upsetness, probably he gets more of it. Yeah. The feeling that I've had to do some things and continue to have to do some things that are hard, things that I don't feel equipped for, things that I don't feel I even have the knowledge that he would have. So, I mean, sometimes, I had to have 2 son-in-law talks. One is officially a son-in-law, one son-in-law to come. I have Reese is married to Peyton, and I have Kaylin, my middle daughter, is engaged to Hayden. And so now I've done 2 of those, and both of those times I have thought, why are you not here to do this? Why do I have to do this by myself? This is not my job. But
And while we laugh, there's some
it's
seriousness
real.
to that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I lived through COVID without Eric, and all of that where the world was really like no one had ever seen it before, and trying to hold down the fort and make the right choices and, just navigate that without a partner. Even stupid things like car problems. Learning, I've known how to mow my yard, but having to have my brother-in-law teach me how to edge and weed eat because, I could pay somebody to do that, but as we've already said, I'm independent and I'd rather do some things myself. So, there's even dumb things but that's another place God's provision steps in, and I have people in my life who in the areas that I don't have the knowledge or feel like I can call. But for sure, I have had more than angry at God, probably. Yeah, I get more angry at Eric, even though it's not his fault.
Sure.
But, one day if I get to tell him, did you see everything that I did, without you? I would love to be able to do that, but maybe in heaven I won't. But earthly side, I think, I'd like to say, do you see what you did?
Yeah.
Did you see all the hard things I've had to navigate?
Yeah. I think if I hear your husband's just had a horrible incident at Lake Overholser, he died basically immediately, and you're there and what's going on, my natural response as a friend is to reach out to you or whoever is in that situation and say, man, that's tough. I'm praying for you. And I know everybody who does that is true and right and means well. And I think probably all, at least for a period of time, do carry out on their commitment to be praying for you. Let's talk about the grief thing a little bit. I know from my own experience, and I won't go through the whole story, but in losing my little brother when I was in high school, how people would respond to me. Somebody comes to you, whether it's a friend or just a well-meaning person, they know your story, they know your situation. Jill, man, this is tough. I understand, though. I'm with you, I lost my grandma, a couple of years ago, and I know exactly what you're going through. Jill, just remember, God has a purpose for this. God's in all of this, or they maybe even start quoting scripture. All things work together for the good, or they say any number of well-meaning things. Again, you're the one in the grieving process, and I'm not asking you to name names or anything like that. That's not the purpose. I just want to look at the grieving process because it's different for everybody. I know when those people responded to me with those well-meaning thoughts, I wanted to lash out. I didn't. I wanted to cuss them out. I didn't audibly. I was angry. What's your response inwardly? When people respond to grief like that, whether it's your particular situation or another person's situation they're going through, when they're well-meaning, they're trying to, how do we deal with somebody like that?
Well, Scott Peterson is my sister's brother-in-law. He did the funeral for us. When we met with him to talk about family memories and things before the funeral, I remember him saying then that people are going to say a lot of really, in his words, I believe, were really stupid things.
Yeah.
And the best thing that we could do is just have grace and know that they're doing the best that they can.
Well, that's a great word to use.
Yeah.
It's not easy to extend, but boy, that's a great word.
Just know that people are trying their best. And I did get some of that for sure. I personally, my very least favorite is everything happens for a reason. I don't believe that at all. In any situation, I think that
it's like saying everything is preordained,
right,
down to every single thing that happens.
I mean, I fully believe God knew Eric was going to die at 43 on May 26th, 2018. He knew it. But I don't think that it happened for a reason. I think that it happened, and if I plug into the right thing, I can have a certain outcome.
Yeah.
Or I can plug into something else and my outcome will be different. He allows me to choose, and I choose to look to him. And I did from the beginning. And that doesn't make me great.
Yeah.
That actually, in my mind, shows how weak I am, that I knew I couldn't do it. That I couldn't do it by myself. I couldn't do it with help of my kids. I couldn't do it with anybody's help. I needed God. I needed his word. I needed assurance every day from him. And it started immediately the next morning. I had multiple devotion books. And my sister Jana got me a couple of other books that were scripture only, but they were categorized. So you could look up certain scriptures that pertain to situations, feelings, emotions, whatever. But I remember every morning just looking in a book, and I'd read it like, well, this doesn't help me today. And I just go on to the next one. So looking to other people, it's more about shifting my focus from others. For me, it was, and how they could help me in my grief. I really didn't look to others for that. I just didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I had people in my life who were holding me up for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
But there definitely were a lot of people who, it really comes from a good place. They want to give you some kind of word, and they just don't know what to say.
Yeah.
A lot of that happens in the grocery store. So for me, some of those, me going back to the grocery store, luckily around that time, Walmart grocery pickup was kind of becoming a big thing.
Yeah.
Or delivery. And I
Yeah.
did utilizing some of that to keep myself out of some of those
Yep.
awkward situations. And definitely feeling like you walk in the room with a neon flashing sign above your head for a while.
I think that's probably natural.
Like everybody's looking at us.
Yep.
And yeah. But the main thing is, for me, especially after Scott pointing that out so early, was like, people are going to say things, but the best thing you can do is just have grace for them, because they're just doing their best. So I think the lesson is more, how can I be towards others in their grief now?
Yeah.
And I certainly think now it's when you're asking someone, how are you doing? Advice I like to give is, how are you doing today? Or how are you doing right now?
That's good.
Feels less overwhelming than,
Yep.
how are you doing? How are you and the girls doing?
Because your emotions and feelings run the gamut.
Yeah.
They don't just right
So,
now is great.
Keeping it in the day, I think, is a way that people can respond to other people. Don't ignore them.
Yeah.
Acknowledge them. If all you can do is just say, I'm so sorry for your loss, that's enough. And, but yeah, trying to keep questions current and short and in the moment. But the best thing any of us can do for others, through my experience with grief, is just be there. Yeah. Listening is more important than speaking.
Yeah.
And knowing that it's okay if someone cries with you, even if it's in the middle of Walmart. I mean, I even cried with someone in Walmart in August. And I mean, someone I hadn't seen in a long time, an old teacher of mine that I ran into a few days before I took my baby to college. And I was feeling overwhelmed and sad, and I don't have Eric here, and here
Yeah.
I am. I'm going to be alone. I mean, so it's okay to have those awkward conversations in public, but also the best thing we can do is just to give people grace. That's the best thing I can do.
We'll kind of wrap this up, but you just said about sending your baby off to college. And I don't like bringing stuff up, but that's why we're here. You're looking at another, I'm being really optimistic, 40 to 50 years of life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You've already lived 6.5 of those years without the love of your life. You still miss him. Your daughters, I'm sure, still miss him. He's not walking them down the aisle. You're doing that.
Mm-hmm. And that's a privilege.
And I think that's so cool. You see it that way. What's the future hold for, obviously when we're in our 90s, I won't live that long, but we don't care. We're ready to get to be with him. But is this all a part of the picture of your life from this point on?
I won't lie that currently I definitely feel in limbo as far as what's next for me. I don't really know. I was committed when Eric died that my kids were it. I've always wanted to be available, but even more so, I don't want to miss it. I want to be available. So I've just been mom for 6.5 years. And I did take Emerson to college this fall, and she luckily isn't that far away, so we see each other. But I don't know work-wise where I land yet. I'm praying every day. I want my life to be meaningful, and I mean eternally meaningful.
Yeah.
When I say that, I want the work that I do to, whether it's in a secular position or I don't know. I want it to have lasting meaning. So
More than just a paycheck.
Right. I'm not willing to just hop into something and I'm thankful that I'm in a position financially right now that I can do that, that I can sit back and say, okay, God, you gotta open doors, or you gotta show me, what's going on to know where I'm supposed to go. So as far as work, I don't know. As far as relationship, he's told me he's got that. So I'm not going to worry about it. I don't always like being alone, but I also don't mind being alone.
Yeah.
So it's both. I don't feel the need to push anything. I'm trusting God to take care of that. So really,
that's pretty big.
Yeah, I don't have a clue, but he's told me some things, and I'm gonna believe him that he's gonna take care of that.
That's so cool. You said Eric asked you what you're gonna miss about him. 6.5 years. It's a long time, but it goes awfully fast too. What do you miss most about him?
Man. He was my best friend. So I think mostly I miss having my best friend, the person I talked to every day about everything. I didn't have to worry what he thought because I knew that he knew who I was, that established relationship of someone who, even when you're at your ugliest, still knows you and loves you, in spite of maybe what they hear from you or see from you. I miss his presence in our lives. I mean, he was hilarious. He was intentional. He was fun. I probably sit around the house a lot more that he's not here because he liked to go. He was creative. But the great thing is a lot of who Eric was is in his daughters. It's in Peyton. It's in Kaylin. It's in Emerson. So I still do have him with me because of them. And he would get such a kick out of who they are now because 2 out of 3 not only look vastly different, but just are very different people than 6.5 years ago. They just are amazing.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I still, in a way, have him. But I wish I had him with me sitting on the couch.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm so thankful that you had a foundation established that enabled you to kind of wrap your arms around your girls and just say, Jesus. I'm so grateful that you had a foundation established so that it wasn't a lashing out at God, although I think God understands when people do that.
Yeah.
It's just amazing that, God has brought peace and you've allowed that from the very start. Are there any other things that you feel need to be shared?
Let's see. Well, another time when we talked, you asked me something about that space that Eric left, that he's gone.
Yeah.
And I would say for me, that space has been filled with my relationship with the Lord, in particular with his word. I love the word more than ever in my life. It has been my comfort, my strength. It has brought me peace. It's what I look to every day. So I would say that has been what's carried me through. When people have seen me and said or whatever, oh, you're so strong. And I say, no, I am not. I'm not so strong. It is the Lord. It is seeking him in his word. It's seeking him in prayer every day. It's offering up everything I don't have control over, which is everything. I just knowing how little control I have and knowing how much he has, that has made the difference for me. I've had a lot of people in my life stick around and love me through this. I've had people that I wasn't that close to that don't even have the same beliefs that I have, that have stepped in and loved me and remembered dates and sent me messages and loved on me and my kids. And it has just been some really beautiful things have happened in my life because of it. You
said even at one point in time, you said even Eric's work had you come, and I think this was probably closer to when he had passed, had you come to share with them or just to be a part of something with them?
Yeah, they had every year they have a meeting company-wide, and they had a meeting in Florida about a year after he passed, just short of a year. And his team had done very well that year. and they invited me to come and speak. And I mean, it's a secular company. It's not a Christian business. And I went up there and told them how much Eric loved Jesus. I mean, it was crazy. Like the things I've been able to do that I never would have thought I could do. I mean, I spoke in front of thousands of people there. Even at Eric's funeral, we did things a little different. A lot of people have everyone pass by like the processional at the end and like pass in front of the family. And I just knew we're not doing that. Yeah. That's not what's best for my kids. I don't want to put them through that. So, but what I said was, I know there's going to be a lot of people here that I don't know that Eric worked with, and I want to speak to them. And so they made sure, the funeral home made sure that all of those people knew that after the ceremony or the funeral was over, that they were going to go to this certain lobby. And I don't know how many there were. The lobby was full. And I went out there and just thanked them so much for coming, that I knew so many of them were so precious to Eric over the years that he worked. And he worked in pharma and then, a couple of different other companies later. And just to say, I know I don't know you, but I want you to know the only reason that we're here and that we have hope and that we know Eric's okay is because he loved the Lord. And if you don't know that and you want to know, you can reach out to me anytime. And I'm not going to lie, there's only a few of those people that I talk to still. But just the boldness that God was able to give me.
The toughest time in your life, he empowered you the most, didn't he?
That I stand on the Lord. That is, none of this is about me. And like I said earlier, I am not special. There's nothing different about me that makes me more able or capable of trusting the Lord than anybody else or him speaking to me. It's just me seeking. And that's what I want people to know, that there is hope. There is hope, and his name is Jesus. That's right. And life is not going to be nice a lot of the time. And I don't feel like I was punished. I don't feel like I'm a victim. I feel like life is hard for everyone, and there's different hard for different people. But the one good thing always is God, and that I don't have to do the hard by myself, that he is with me, and he can be with you and with anybody else, and no matter what hard thing they're going through. And we're going to keep facing hard. I've still had a lot of hard in 6.5 years. I still have a lot of hard ahead of me. But I'm going to keep leaning on the Lord. And the verse that I came across most recently that I hope people will see in me is Psalm 119, 114. You are my refuge and shield. I have put my hope in your word. And then just a few verses later, verse 74 says, may those who fear you rejoice when they see me, for I have put my hope in your word. So I hope that instead of people seeing me and feeling sad for me, that they will see the hope that God can bring, that he is living through me. I hope.
That is so cool. One last question. You still talk to Eric?
Sometimes. Yeah.
I'm not asking what you say.
Yeah.
I'm just asking.
Yeah.
Everybody grieves when they have situations like this. They grieve differently and in their own way. And there's not a set way or pattern for which we're supposed to follow, and this is how you grieve. I am very thankful you've chosen to include Christ in your grieving process. It doesn't make grieving easy, but God's grace certainly does help the process in a way that nothing else can. And I'm so thankful you've come with us today to share your story and
to let us know that when we are going through tough times, we can just fall into his arms and call out his name, Jesus.
Yeah.
And then he begins to work with us.
Yeah.
Something very peaceful about that. And I think that your job won't just be a paycheck. I think your experience of 6.5 years ago and since will be continually told and lived out and touching people's lives. I really do.
I hope so.
You did it a year after that to thousands of people, and I think you're going to be doing that in a much more close-up, personal way that is much more noticeable and recognizable to you and experienced and felt by you. And so I believe God has an incredible plan for you, Jill. Thanks for doing this with us today. You're awesome.
For asking.
Feeling like a refugee, like it don't belong to me. The colors flash across the sky. This air feels strange to me, feeling like a tragedy. I take a deep breath and close my eyes one last time. One last time. Storms on the wasteland, dark clouds on the plains again. We were born into the fight, but I'm not sentimental. This skin and bones is a rental, and no one makes it out alive. Yeah. Until I die singing songs on the shores of Babylon, still looking for a home in a world where I belong, where the weak are finally strong, where the righteous right the wrongs, still looking for a home in a world where I belong. Feels like we're just waiting, while our hearts are just breaking.